Captain Jake Morrison stood in the control room of the deep space station Olympus 7, watching the green lights blink on his screens. For 23 years, humanity had been listening to voices from the stars, but they had never answered back. The alien signals came every day like clockwork, and Jake knew each pattern by heart. His team worked around him in quiet focus, their eyes fixed on displays that showed radio waves and data streams from across the galaxy. Dr. Helen Parker sat at her desk in the corner, surrounded by papers covered in strange symbols and numbers. She had spent most of her adult life learning to understand what the aliens were saying to each other. Her work was slow and careful, like putting together a puzzle with 10,000 pieces. Every day she found new words and meanings hidden in the signals that came from space. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Hegemony, and they ruled 12 different worlds with iron fists. The biggest and strongest group in this alien empire were the HFY. Helen had learned that they were warriors who believed that might made right. They spoke often of conquest and glory, of weak species that bent the knee to their power. Their language was full of words about honor and strength, but also about fear and submission. What worried Helen most was how often they talked about Earth in their messages. Commander Lisa Carter worked on Earth in a building that nobody talked about publicly. Her job was to decide what humanity should do about the aliens, and she had spent years arguing with world leaders who wanted to send messages to the stars. Lisa believed that staying quiet was the smart choice. Every day she read Helen's reports about what the aliens were saying, and every day she became more sure that silence was keeping Earth safe. The HFY thought that quiet meant weakness. In their culture, if someone did not speak up or fight back, it meant they were afraid or too weak to matter. Helen had translated hundreds of their conversations about Earth, and the pattern was always the same. They saw humanity's silence as proof that humans were primitive and scared. They talked about Earth like it was a fruit ready to be picked from a tree. Admiral Ryan Tucker knew about the alien threats, and he was not sitting still. While the politicians argued about whether to make contact, Ryan was preparing for war. He worked in secret with the best minds on Earth to build weapons and defenses that could protect humanity if the aliens decided to attack. Ryan understood that hope for the best meant preparing for the worst, and the worst looked very bad indeed. Sam Rodriguez was one of the engineers working for Admiral Tucker. His job was to study the alien technology that came through in their transmissions. The aliens were not trying to share their secrets, but they talked about their ships and weapons in ways that gave Sam clues about how everything worked. He spent his days taking apart alien science and putting it back together in new ways that could help humanity survive. Kate Williams worked alongside Sam, but her focus was on weapons. She studied every detail about alien armor and shields that Helen could translate. Kate was building new guns and missiles that could punch through alien defenses. Her weapons looked nothing like the guns that armies used on Earth. They fired beams of energy and projectiles that moved faster than bullets. Kate knew that if war came, humanity would need every advantage they could get. On the alien worlds, General HFY was growing impatient with humanity's silence. He commanded millions of HFY warriors, and he believed that Earth was wasting everyone's time by refusing to communicate. In HFY culture, silence in the face of superior power was an insult. HFY had conquered 17 worlds for the hegemony, and he saw Earth as an easy target that would add to his glory. The general spoke often to his advisors about organizing a collection mission to Earth. The HFY had done this many times before with worlds that seemed weak or undefended. They would arrive with overwhelming force, demand submission, and add another species to their empire. HFY believed that humans would surrender immediately when they saw the power of his fleet. He thought it would be the easiest conquest of his career. War Speaker Korthmel supported HFY's plans. As the official voice of HFY military policy, Korthmel had the power to authorize attacks on new worlds. He had been watching Earth for years, waiting for any sign that humans might be dangerous. Instead, all he saw was a species that seemed afraid to even say hello to their galactic neighbors. Korthmel was convinced that Earth would fall without a fight. Back on Olympus 7, Jake Morrison watched his screens and wondered what would happen when the waiting ended. He could see in the data that alien ships were moving closer to human space. Helen's translations showed that the aliens were talking more and more about Earth every day. Their tone was changing from curiosity to hunger, like predators circling prey. Helen worked late into the night trying to understand every detail of alien culture and technology. She knew that her translations might be the key to humanity's survival. The more she learned about the Kethvar, the more she realized how differently they saw the world. To them, strength was the only thing that mattered, and anything else was weakness to be exploited. Lisa Carter read Helen's reports and felt the weight of impossible choices. Every day that humanity stayed silent, the aliens became more convinced that Earth was helpless. But every day that passed also gave Sam Rodriguez and Kate Williams more time to prepare defenses. Lisa had to balance the risk of seeming weak against the risk of revealing humanity's hand too early. The alien signals continued to flow through space, carrying messages of conquest and dominion. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, fleets were moving toward Earth. The galactic hegemony had made their decision about humanity, and they were coming to collect their prize. They believed they understood everything about the quiet species on the small blue world, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had confused humanity's patience with weakness, and that confusion would cost them everything. The massive alien fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system on a Tuesday morning that changed everything. Ambassador Alex Chen watched the displays in the command center as hundreds of alien ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Pluto. Their vessels were sleek and deadly, shaped like weapons even when they were just floating in space. The largest ship was 10 times bigger than anything humanity had ever built, and it broadcast a message in perfect English that made Alex's blood run. Cold Dr. Maya Johnson worked frantically to set up translation equipment in the diplomatic shuttle that would carry Earth's representatives to the alien flagship. She had studied Helen Parker's work for years, but this would be the first time any human would speak directly with the beings who had been watching Earth from afar. Maya knew that every word would matter, and that mistakes in translation could mean war or peace for all of humanity. Colonel Ben Foster checked his weapons one more time before boarding the shuttle USS Liberty. He was not expecting to fight today, but 20 years of military service had taught him to prepare for anything. Ben understood that he was probably walking into a trap, but someone had to protect the diplomats who were trying to save Earth. His job was to keep Alex Chen and Maya Johnson alive long enough to find out what the aliens really wanted. The Liberty launched from Earth's hidden military base near Luna, its hull painted white with symbols of peace from every nation on Earth. Alex Chen sat in the passenger compartment, reading through briefing files that contained everything humanity knew about Kethvar culture. The aliens valued strength and directness, but they also followed strict rules about honor and respect. Alex hoped that understanding their customs might help avoid a war that humanity was not ready to fight. War Speaker Korthmel waited for the human delegation aboard his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. His ship was a floating city of metal and weapons, crewed by thousands of Kethvar warriors who had never lost a battle. Korthmel wore his ceremonial armor, covered in symbols that told the story of every world he had conquered. He expected the humans to surrender immediately when they saw the power arrayed against them. The meeting took place in a chamber designed to intimidate visitors. The walls were covered with weapons taken from defeated enemies, and the ceiling showed star maps of every world that belonged to the hegemony. Korthmel sat on a throne made from the hull of the first ship he had ever captured, while his advisors stood around him in formation like an army ready for war. Alex Chen walked into the chamber with Maya Johnson and Ben Foster beside him. The aliens were larger than humans, with gray skin and red eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Their faces showed no emotion as they studied the human delegation, and Alex could feel the weight of their attention like a physical force. Maya whispered translations as the aliens spoke among themselves, and Alex realized they were debating whether humans were even intelligent enough for conversation. Korthmel stood and began his speech with words that Maya translated as a formal declaration of conquest. The hegemony had decided that Earth would become part of their empire, and humanity would serve as soldiers and workers for their galactic wars. In exchange, the aliens would provide protection from other threats and allow humans to keep their planet as long as they followed orders without question. Alex Chen listened to the translation and felt anger rising in his chest. These aliens had traveled across space to demand that humanity surrender everything they held dear. They spoke as if Earth belonged to them already, as if humans were nothing more than resources to be harvested. Alex took a deep breath and gave his response in the calmest voice he could manage. The human ambassador explained that Earth was interested in peaceful relations and cultural exchange, but would not accept domination by any outside force. Alex offered to share human knowledge and technology in return for respect and autonomy. He spoke about the value of cooperation between equals, and suggested that the galaxy would be stronger if different species worked together, instead of conquering each other. Maya Johnson watched the alien faces as she translated Alex's words, and she could see confusion spreading through the chamber. The Kethvar advisors whispered among themselves in voices that sounded surprised and angry. They had expected immediate submission or desperate pleading, not a polite rejection of their demands. Some of them seemed to think that the humans did not understand the situation they were in. Korthmel responded with what Maya recognized as a formal threat. He described the size of his fleet and the power of his weapons, listing the worlds that had tried to resist the hegemony and failed. The war speaker seemed genuinely puzzled by humanity's refusal to surrender, as if he could not understand why anyone would choose destruction over slavery. Captain Jake Morrison monitored the meeting from Olympus 7, watching as alien ships moved into attack positions throughout the solar system. The enemy fleet was spreading out to surround Earth and cut off any escape routes. Sam Rodriguez reported that his scanners were detecting energy buildups in alien weapon systems, while Kate Williams prepared her hidden defense platforms for immediate activation if the talks failed. Admiral Ryan Tucker coordinated with military commanders around the world as the alien threat became real. Underground bunkers opened to release squadrons of fighters that had been hidden for years, while orbital defense stations powered up weapons that looked like civilian satellites. Ryan knew that humanity had only one chance to survive if diplomacy failed, and that chance depended on surprising the aliens with capabilities they did not expect. President Sarah Lewis spoke from the United Nations building in a last attempt to find peace. She offered the aliens everything that Earth could give without surrendering their freedom, including access to human art, science, and culture. Sarah spoke about the beauty of diversity and the strength that came from voluntary cooperation between different peoples. Dr. Helen Parker translated the alien response to President Lewis's speech, and her face went pale as she read the words. The Kethvar saw humanity's offers as signs of weakness and desperation. They interpreted every attempt at diplomacy as proof that humans were afraid to fight. The aliens had decided that Earth would serve them whether humans agreed or not. The final message from Korthmel was delivered with cold efficiency. 3 human outposts in the asteroid belt disappeared in flashes of light, vaporized by alien weapons as a demonstration of what would happen to anyone who resisted. The war speaker gave humanity 24 hours to surrender unconditionally, or he would begin the systematic destruction of human civilization. As the USS Liberty returned to Earth, Maya Johnson worked through recordings of every word the aliens had spoken. She could see the pattern clearly now. The Kethvar had never intended to negotiate as equals. They saw humanity's patience and diplomacy as evidence of fear, and they mistook careful preparation for helpless desperation. The aliens thought they understood everything about human nature, but they had only seen the surface of something much deeper and more dangerous. Alex Chen filed his report with President Lewis and Admiral Tucker, recommending immediate military action. The time for peaceful solutions had passed the moment the aliens destroyed human outposts without warning. Ben Foster began organizing evacuation plans for major cities, while Maya Johnson prepared translations that would help coordinate with any alien species who might oppose the hegemony. The alien fleet waited at the edge of the solar system, confident that humanity would see reason and surrender before the deadline expired. Korthmel and his warriors had conquered so many worlds that they had forgotten what it felt like to face real resistance. They had no idea that their demonstration of power had just triggered the awakening of something that would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy forever. War Speaker Korthmel gave the order to attack exactly 24 hours after his ultimatum expired. The alien fleet moved toward Earth in perfect formation, their ships arranged in patterns that had brought victory across dozens of worlds. Korthmel expected this to be the easiest conquest of his career, a simple demonstration of superior firepower that would end with human surrender in less than an hour. The first wave of Kethvar ships approached Earth's orbital space expecting to face primitive chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. Instead, they encountered something that made their sensors scream warnings they had never heard before. Hidden defense platforms that had looked like space debris suddenly came alive with energy. revealing themselves as weapon stations. Armed with technology, the aliens thought only they possessed. Sam Rodriguez watched from his control center as the planetary defense grid activated around Earth. The weapons he had built from stolen alien science fired their first shots at targets that had no idea what was about to hit them. Beams of focused energy and projectiles, moving at impossible speeds, reached out across space to touch the hulls of ships that had seemed untouchable just moments before. The Kethvar fleet commander felt his first moment of doubt when his flagship's shields flickered under human fire. The energy signatures coming from Earth's weapons looked familiar, like technology his own people used, but somehow improved and focused in ways that made them more deadly than anything in his experience. His sensors told him that the humans were using hegemony science against hegemony ships, but that should have been impossible. Captain Jake Morrison led the first squadron of human fighters to launch from hidden bases scattered throughout the solar system. His ships were small and fast, built for hit-and-run attacks that would confuse enemies used to facing opponents who fought fair. Jake's pilots had trained for years in tactics that no honorable warrior would use, and they were about to show the galaxy what human creativity could do when applied to warfare. Colonel Ben Foster defended Luna Base as alien landing craft tried to establish a foothold on the moon's surface. The Kethvar warriors who emerged from their ships found themselves facing an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Human soldiers used the moon's low gravity and harsh environment as weapons, turning the lunar landscape into a death trap for invaders who had expected easy victory. Admiral Ryan Tucker coordinated the defense from his command ship hidden in the asteroid belt. The plan he had developed over 20 years of preparation was finally being put to the test, and every element was performing better than expected. Human ships emerged from concealment throughout the solar system, revealing a defensive network that the aliens had never detected despite years of observation. Dr. Maya Johnson monitored alien communications from her post on Earth, translating the growing panic in Kethvar transmissions. The enemy commanders were reporting impossible things: human weapons that cut through their best armor, tactics that made no sense according to their understanding of warfare, and casualties mounting faster than they could count. The aliens had expected to face a weak species begging for mercy, not warriors who seemed to welcome death as long as they could take enemies with them. The Kethvar had built their empire by following rules of engagement that emphasized honor and formal combat. They expected their enemies to line up and fight like civilized beings, using strategies that could be predicted and countered. Instead, human forces used every dirty trick they could think of, from suicide attacks to weapons that turned the aliens' own technology against them. Kate Williams's plasma cannons fired from hidden positions throughout Earth's orbital space, each shot carefully calculated to exploit weaknesses in alien ship design that Dr. Helen Parker had identified from years of intercepted transmissions. The weapons were invisible until they fired, and they hit harder than anything the Kethvar had faced since they started building their empire. General Zephi watched his carefully planned invasion falling apart from his command ship at the edge of the battle. Human resistance was not just stronger than expected, it was fundamentally different from anything in his experience. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to gain, using tactics that seemed insane until they worked perfectly. The asteroid belt became a killing field, as human forces used the rocky debris as cover and ammunition. Sam Rodriguez had spent years placing weapons and sensors throughout the belt, turning every large rock into a potential fortress or missile. Alien ships found themselves under attack from directions they had not expected, by enemies who seemed to appear from empty space. War Speaker Korthmel realized his mistake when human fighters began ramming his largest ships with explosives strapped to their hulls. The pilots who carried out these attacks were volunteers who chose death over defeat, and their sacrifice destroyed vessels that had taken decades to build. No civilized species fought this way, and the Kethvar had no defense against enemies who treated their own lives as weapons. Dr. Helen Parker continued translating alien communications as the battle raged, and what she heard made her understand just how badly the Kethvar had misunderstood humanity. The aliens were calling humans impossible things: deathworlders, nightmare warriors, and creatures that fought like the universe itself was trying to kill them. They could not understand How a species they had dismissed as weak could be so terrifyingly effective at war. Captain Morrison's fighter squadron used tactics that made the aliens question everything they thought they knew about combat. Human pilots flew in patterns that looked random, but were actually carefully coordinated, attacking from multiple directions at once while using the gravity of planets and moons to accelerate their ships beyond what should have been possible. Colonel Foster's ground forces demonstrated human endurance and adaptability when Kethvar troops tried to establish bases on asteroids and moons throughout the solar system. Human soldiers could survive in environments that killed alien warriors, and they used this advantage to attack from places where no sane enemy would hide. The psychological impact of human warfare proved as devastating as the physical damage. Kethvar commanders reported that their warriors were developing what Dr. Maya Johnson recognized as trauma symptoms from fighting an enemy that seemed to enjoy battle more than they feared death. Some alien soldiers refused to board ships headed toward Earth, claiming that humans were not natural creatures but demons wearing flesh. Admiral Tucker's hidden fleet struck at the heart of the alien formation, using ships disguised as civilian vessels to get close before revealing their true nature. The HMS Defiance led the attack with weapons that fired faster and hit harder than anything the Kethvar thought possible from such a small ship. As the battle continued, reports reached other members of the Galactic Hegemony about the disaster unfolding in human space. Species that had served the Kethvar for centuries began to question whether their masters were truly invincible, and some quietly began planning their own rebellions. War Speaker Korthmel faced a choice he had never expected to make. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy he had thought would surrender without a fight, and every hour brought new reports of impossible human victories. The species he had dismissed as primitive and weak was teaching the galaxy a lesson about the difference between silence and helplessness. The Kethvar retreat began 3 days after the invasion started, with alien ships fleeing toward the edge of the solar system, while human forces harassed them every step of the way. The proud warriors of the hegemony left behind wreckage and survivors who would carry stories of human warfare back to their homeworlds. General Zephi filed his report with words he had never expected. To write, the humans had won a complete victory against forces that should have crushed them easily. The species that had stayed quiet for 20 years had revealed themselves to be the most dangerous enemy the Kethvar had ever faced, and the balance of power in the galaxy would never be the same again. President Sarah Lewis stood before the emergency session of world leaders and spoke the words that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Operation Prometheus was now active, and humanity would show the universe exactly what happened when peaceful people were forced to become warriors. The time for hiding their true capabilities had ended when the aliens chose to attack rather than negotiate. Admiral Ryan Tucker received authorization to deploy every secret weapon and hidden ship that humanity had built during their years of silent preparation. Across the solar system, asteroid mining stations revealed themselves as military bases. Civilian ships dropped their disguises to become warships, and defense platforms that had pretended to be space junk came online with weapons that could crack moons in half. The HMS Defiance emerged from behind Jupiter with Captain Lisa Carter in command, leading a fleet of ships that the aliens had never detected despite years of surveillance. These vessels had been built in secret using technology stolen from Kethvar transmissions, then improved by human engineers who understood that survival meant being better than their enemies at their own game. Sam Rodriguez activated the Sol defense grid from his hidden control center, turning hundreds of asteroids into kinetic bombardment platforms that could hurl rocks at near-light speed toward any target in the solar system. The Kethvar had thought that space around Earth was empty and harmless, but Rodriguez had spent 20 years turning every piece of debris into a potential weapon. Dr. Helen Parker's intelligence network finally showed its true value as human forces used detailed knowledge of alien ship designs to target critical systems with surgical precision. Every weakness in Kethvar technology had been catalogued and studied, and now human weapons exploited those flaws with devastating efficiency. Kate Williams unleashed experimental weapons that used the aliens' own energy signatures against them. Her plasma cannons fired bolts that could punch through shields designed to stop conventional attacks, while her missile systems turned alien point defense lasers into guides that led explosives directly to their targets. The psychological warfare proved as effective as the physical destruction. Dr. Maya Johnson translated intercepted communications that revealed Kethvar soldiers, describing humans with words that meant nightmare, deathbringer, and impossible enemy. The proud warriors of the hegemony had never faced opponents who seemed to grow stronger the more desperate their situation became. Colonel Ben Foster's ground forces demonstrated human adaptability when alien commanders tried to establish forward bases on moons and asteroids throughout the solar system. Human soldiers operated in vacuum, extreme cold, and radiation levels that killed Kethvar troops, using harsh environments as weapons against enemies who needed life support to survive. Captain Jake Morrison led fighter squadrons that used tactics no civilized species would attempt. His pilots flew suicide runs that destroyed ships worth more than entire planets, traded their lives for strategic advantages, and fought with a fury that alien warriors found both terrifying and incomprehensible. The Kethvar word for human pilot became synonymous with relentless hunter in their language. The broader impact of human warfare began to spread through hegemony space as survivors carried reports of impossible battles back to their home worlds. Species that had served the Kethvar for centuries started to question whether their masters were truly invincible, and rebellion began to simmer on worlds that had been quiet for generations. Admiral Tucker's strategic plan unfolded perfectly as human forces attacked not just the invasion fleet, but also supply lines and communication networks that connected the Kethvar to their empire. Every alien ship that tried to bring reinforcements found itself hunted by human vessels that appeared from nowhere and vanished like ghosts. The HMS Defiance demonstrated human naval tactics when Captain Carter led her ship directly into the center of the alien formation, using maneuvers that violated every rule of space combat the Kethvar understood. Her vessel survived attacks that should have destroyed it, fought with weapons that hit harder than physics said was possible, and escaped from situations that looked hopeless. War Speaker Korthmel watched his invasion force crumble as reports reached him of human capabilities that his intelligence officers had insisted were impossible. The species that had seemed weak and primitive was using technology more advanced than anything in the hegemony, fighting with skills that surpassed the greatest warriors in the galaxy. General Zephame faced the collapse of his military reputation as news of the disaster spread to other hegemony commanders. The enemy he had expected to conquer in hours had instead taught his forces the true meaning of terror, and survivors of human attacks were developing psychological trauma that made them unfit for future combat. The cultural shock proved as devastating as the military defeat. Kethvar society was built on the belief that strength conquered everything, but humans had shown that there were kinds of strength the aliens did not understand. Species throughout the galaxy began to whisper about the quiet people from Earth who had hidden their true nature until forced to reveal. Dr. Parker's analysis of intercepted communications revealed that the word human had entered dozens of alien languages with meanings that ranged from deathworld predator to beautiful terror. Some species spoke of humans with religious reverence, believing that they were gods of war, sent to reshape the galaxy through violence and sacrifice. Sam Rodriguez's hidden manufacturing facilities produced weapons and ships faster than the aliens could destroy them, using automated systems that had been preparing for war while the galaxy thought Earth was defenseless. Human industrial capacity proved as terrifying as human military skill, as new weapons appeared in battle faster than the Kethvar could adapt to counter them. The asteroid belt became a graveyard of alien ships, as human forces used every rock and particle of dust as cover or ammunition. Kethvar vessels found themselves under attack from all directions at once, by enemies who treated the harsh environment of space as their natural habitat. Captain Morrison's final attack on the alien flagship became legend among human forces when his damaged fighter crashed through the bridge of Korthmel's command ship, killing the war speaker and breaking the spine of Kethvar resistance. The image of a human pilot choosing death over retreat became a symbol that spread fear through alien fleets across the galaxy. Colonel Foster's successful defense of Luna base proved that humans could hold ground against impossible odds when they chose to make a stand. His soldiers fought for 72 hours without rest, using the moon's environment as a weapon, while alien reinforcements poured down from orbit. The surrender of the remaining Kethvar forces came not from military defeat, but from psychological collapse. Alien commanders reported that their warriors refused to fight enemies who seemed to welcome death as an old friend, and some Kethvar units simply stopped functioning when ordered to attack human positions. President Lewis addressed the surviving alien commanders with words that would be remembered as the moment when humanity announced its arrival as a galactic power. She explained that humans had chosen peace not from weakness but from hope, and that forcing them to abandon that hope had consequences that would reshape the stars themselves. So the final phase of Operation Prometheus began as human forces moved beyond defense to active pursuit of fleeing alien ships. The lesson that humanity intended to teach the galaxy was simple. Attacking Earth meant facing consequences that would follow the attackers home, and peaceful species should never be mistaken for helpless ones. Admiral Tucker's fleet prepared for humanity's first interstellar campaign as intelligence reports showed the galactic hegemony beginning to fracture under the weight of their defeat. The quiet species from the small blue world had spoken at last, and their words were written in fire across the darkness between the stars. 3 months after the first alien ship appeared in human space, Ambassador Alex Chen sat across from representatives of a dozen different species who had come to Earth seeking protection, alliance, or simply the chance to understand how everything had changed so quickly. The conference room overlooked the construction of humanity's first interstellar shipyard, where vessels designed for exploration and defense rose from blueprints that combined human engineering with technology taken from defeated enemies. The Zephyrian Republic had been the first to break away from the galactic hegemony, declaring independence within hours of receiving reports about the disaster in human space. Ambassador Veltar spoke for her people with words that Dr. Maya Johnson translated as a formal request for alliance against their former Kethvar masters. The bird-like aliens had suffered under hegemony rule for 3 centuries, and they saw humanity as the force that could finally break their chains. War Speaker Korthmel was dead, killed when Captain Jake Morrison's fighter crashed through his flagship's bridge in the final hours of the battle. His replacement, War Speaker Drekvol, had retreated beyond Pluto's orbit with the scattered remains of what had once been the mightiest fleet in the galaxy. The proud Kethvar navy that had conquered dozens of worlds now counted its ships in hundreds rather than thousands, and every vessel bore scars from human weapons. Admiral Ryan Tucker commanded the new Solar Defense Force from his flagship, the UES Humanity, as it patrolled the outer reaches of the solar system. His mission had evolved from protecting Earth to maintaining the peace that humanity's victory had created. Ships from across the galaxy now traveled to human space seeking trade, technology, or simply the chance to meet the species that had humbled the hegemony. Captain Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the HMS Defiance as it prepared for humanity's first diplomatic mission to alien worlds. Her ship would carry Ambassador Chen to the Zephyrian homeworld, where humans would establish their first embassy on another planet. The vessel that had led the charge against Kethvar forces would now serve as a symbol of humanity's willingness to build rather than just destroy. Dr. Helen Parker worked around the clock to establish communication protocols with species that were making contact with humanity for the first time. Her translation systems had evolved from simple code breaking to complex cultural analysis that helped humans understand not just what aliens were saying, but what they really meant. Every day brought new languages and new opportunities for misunderstanding that could lead to conflict. Sam Rodriguez supervised the construction of defensive platforms throughout human space, sharing shield technology with allied species while carefully maintaining humanity's military advantages. The engineer who had spent years learning from alien transmissions now taught others how to protect themselves from the kinds of weapons that had once seemed invincible. The psychological impact of humanity's emergence continued to spread through the galaxy like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Species that had never heard of Earth before the invasion now spoke of humans in hushed tones, describing them as sleeping giants who had awakened to reshape the balance of power among the stars. Kate Williams found herself in the unexpected position of weapons consultant to species that wanted to defend themselves against Kethvar retaliation. Her plasma cannons and missile systems were being copied and improved by alien engineers who had learned that the galaxy was no longer safe for those who relied on others for protection. President Sarah Lewis addressed the new Galactic Council from United Nations headquarters, speaking to an audience that included both former enemies and new allies. Her words carried weight that came not from threats but from the knowledge that humanity had proven its strength when challenged. She spoke about the responsibilities that came with power, and the importance of using force only when peaceful solutions had failed. The Kethvar Empire struggled to maintain control over worlds that had served them for generations. Reports reached human intelligence services of rebellions breaking out across hegemony space, as species that had been conquered long ago found the courage to fight for their freedom. The invincible reputation of the Kethvar military had been shattered along with their fleet. Colonel Ben Foster established the first human military academy on Luna, where officers from allied species came to study the tactics that had defeated the hegemony invasion. The curriculum included courses on asymmetric warfare, environmental adaptation, and the psychological aspects of combat that had proven so effective against traditional military doctrine. Dr. Maya Johnson discovered that the phrase human quiet had entered more than 40 alien languages, always with the same meaning, the deceptive calm that preceded devastating retaliation. Species throughout the galaxy had learned to recognize the signs that peaceful people were being pushed toward war, and many conflicts were being resolved through negotiation rather than risk awakening sleeping giants. The economic implications of humanity's emergence proved as significant as the military consequences. Human technology and engineering expertise became the most sought-after commodities in the galaxy, while Earth's position at the center of major trade routes made it a hub for commerce between species that had never dealt with each other before. Captain Morrison had become a legend among human pilots and a nightmare to enemy commanders. His sacrifice in destroying Korthmel's flagship was remembered in songs and stories that spread throughout human space, inspiring a generation of warriors who understood that sometimes the greatest victory required the ultimate sacrifice. General Zeph High faced court-martial proceedings for his role in the failed invasion, but his real punishment was watching his reputation crumble as other Kethvar commanders distanced themselves from the disaster. The general who had expected easy glory found himself blamed for awakening an enemy that the hegemony could not defeat. The technological revolution that followed humanity's victory changed the nature of warfare throughout the galaxy. Human innovations in shield technology, weapons design, and tactical doctrine were being studied and copied by every species that could obtain them. The balance of power that had remained stable for centuries was shifting as new players emerged with capabilities that matched or exceeded the old empires. Ambassador Chen prepared for his most important mission yet, negotiating the formal end of hostilities with the Kethvar Empire and establishing the terms under which humanity would take its place among the galactic powers. The species that had chosen silence for 20 years would now help write the laws that governed relations between the stars. Admiral Tucker received reports of alien fleets approaching human space with messages of friendship rather than conquest. The Solar Defense Force that had been built to protect Earth from invasion now served as guardians of the peace that humanity's strength had created. Ships that had been designed for war were being converted for exploration and diplomacy. The final irony of the situation was not lost on observers throughout the galaxy. The Kethvar had attacked humanity because they interpreted silence as weakness, but that silence had been the sound of a species, learning everything they needed to know about their enemies while preparing for the war they hoped would never come. President Lewis closed her address to the Galactic Council with words that would define humanity's role in the new order that was emerging from the ashes of the old. She reminded the assembled representatives that humans had chosen peace not from fear, but from wisdom, and that forcing peaceful people to become warriors created consequences that reached far beyond any single battle. The construction of humanity's first interstellar colonies began as volunteers prepared to carry human civilization to the stars. These settlements would serve as symbols of humanity's commitment to building rather than conquering, and as reminders to potential enemies that attacking one human world meant facing retaliation from all of them. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would not be forgotten. Silence did not mean weakness. Patience was not the same as fear. And the most dangerous enemies were often those who preferred peace but were willing to fight when no other choice remained. Humanity had spoken at last, and their words were written in the stars themselves for all to see and remember.